Christopher, I think you have at least one coworker with you today, correct?
Yes, yeah, I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues, Angelina Panettiere, who's our Legislative Director for Information Communications Technology, and our Director of Sustainability Innovations also joining the call as well, though off camera.
Okay. All right. Well, go ahead, Christopher. Welcome.
Great. Well, thanks so much for inviting us to share on our work on artificial intelligence. I'm Christopher Jordan. I'm a senior specialist of innovation at the National League of Cities. We're based in Washington, D.C. As I mentioned, I'm joined here by Angelina Panettiere. We were both authors on NLC's recent publication called AI in Cities Report and Toolkit. That's based on work we did in 2024, which I'm happy to dig into what's in the report and share out some of that information with you all. But first, I wanted to pass it to Angelina to describe a little bit more of what NLC is for those of you who don't know, and then also provide some background on why we did this work in the first place. So with that, I'll hand it over to Angelina.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. As Chris mentioned, my name is Angelina Panettiere. I'm NLC's Legislative Director for Information Technology and Communications, which is a very long way of saying that I manage our organization's telecommunications policy. NLC as an organization does a lot of different things for cities. I'm hoping that most of the city representatives in this meeting are familiar with NLC. But if not, we just celebrated our centennial anniversary last year. We are the nation's largest and oldest association for municipal governments. And we work in three primary areas. We provide federal advocacy services to cities. So we advocate before Congress, federal agencies, and the courts. We also do research and disseminate information, as you'll see with this report. That's a pretty good example of it. And then lastly, we provide technical assistance to cities and help them be the best, help local leaders be the best local leaders that they can be. So I mentioned I work in our federal advocacy department, and as part of that work, I staff our information technology and communications committee. This committee is responsible for steering our organization's policy positions and advocacy work on everything related to tech and telecom. So artificial intelligence falls squarely in that bucket. Several years ago, our ITC committee, as we call it, identified the need for our organization to start playing in the artificial intelligence space. We adopted our first resolution taking a position on federal AI policy in 2023. Last year, our organization decided we needed to take a step further and not only take a position on federal policy, but start really digging into how AI is being used and implemented and governed within local governments. So at the start of last year, 2024, our president, David Sander, appointed an AI task force that got together several times throughout the year to discuss some of the most pressing issues that they saw around the implementation of AI in cities. Think through what sorts of resources local leaders might need to really be effective and what information their colleagues needed to best understand this technology in a way that allows them to implement it responsibly, to work with their residents around AI, to work with city staff around AI. And the result of that year of work was our AI toolkit. And I will hand it over to Chris to get into the details of what exactly we included there.
Wonderful. Great. So yeah, we were really, really excited about this toolkit. We just published it in November, coincided with our City Summit event in November, one of our yearly conferences. So this is called Report and a Toolkit because the first half is our report of everything we learned about AI this year. We took kind of three topics throughout the year with our committee and looked at them one at a time. The first was on demystifying artificial intelligence, so defining it for public sector use. The second topic we looked at was about risks, unique risks associated with AI and generative AI, and how to form governance strategies to combat those risks. And then the third topic was on actually looking at the use cases that are ready for adoption right now and what's of interest in the future. So I just want to start with looking at what AI is. This is This publication, if you're wondering what AI is, or you're trying to show city council or other mayors or anyone in your city what AI is, we define it here first in the report, and we look at it in three ways. We look at three common types of AI because AI is a basket of tools, not just one tool. And importantly, we don't say this explicitly in the report, but AI is not just robots, right? Like AI has been around for a while. And there's lots of different ways to conceptualize it for general use, but also particularly in the public sector. But these three types of AI seem to be the most broad categories of AI. So that first is predictive systems that take lots and lots of data. They make predictions about future trends based on that data. And you don't need to feed those algorithms specific rules. They can learn on their own. So this is a type of AI that's been in existence for a number of years. Cities have used it for things related to public safety, as well as managing public infrastructure. The second category, which is the most sort of trending or being discussed today over the past 2 years, is generative AI. That includes tools like ChatGPT, Claude's Anthropic model. Generative AI can create new things. It's very highly creative. It can create images, but also video, audio, code for a website. And as we know, there are many, many risks associated with this kind of use of generative AI, not just with misinformation and deepfakes, but also in terms of responsible use of the tool for data analysis and decision making. And last, there's perceptive AI, and this includes things like computer vision. Some cities have used this to identify potholes or urban blight, where they can actually put cameras on public vehicles, and they do their routes around the city like on a waste truck, and then there's an algorithm that's trained that can detect whatever it is that administrator or official might be looking for using that perceptive AI technology. So those are three broad categories of AI. So I want to talk about now what I think is most interesting, which is what cities are doing currently on AI. I think that we're still in kind of an early adopter phase of the diffusion curve. So these are just a handful of examples, and they fall into kind of three different areas or objectives. And the first is improving city services. The second would be more for internal use and assisting employee tasks and sort of helping your city staff become more efficient in their work. And the third would be in the analytics and decision-making category, which would fall into things like I mentioned to, bring real-time data into decision-making. But I included here some diverse examples. So, for example, Dearborn, Michigan is a city that has many households where they speak languages other than English at home. So a need that they saw was to have translation services, and generative AI is assisting them to bring all their online content through a chatbot online where users and residents can go online and they can get the information that they're seeking. And also on the back end of that, there's a translation element happening so it can translate into the language that they're using with the interface. Sunnyvale, California, in the Bay Area, close to San Jose, they're using generative AI in public meetings. So, residents who attend, they can get live translation in time. There's closed captioning as well for folks that are attending online. So there's lots of AI tools that can provide services like this, like Otter AI is a common one that's used in conjunction with Zoom, where it can not just give you a live transcription, but also can offer real-time insights on the meeting as it's happening. A really cool one that's close to home for myself is the DC Compass based in Washington, DC. And this is a more, I would say, impressive tool because they really built this in-house. I think a lot of these cities are going to vendors. They're working with companies like Google or IBM or Microsoft, using Microsoft Copilot. But DC really did kind of build this from the ground up in-house because they have the capacity to. But really, what they're doing is they're taking lots of public data and they have what's called the DC Compass, which can provide statistical summaries of questions that you're asking it. So you could ask it, how many trees are in DC, or what time is trash pickup at this address, and it can tell you that information, which is completely unbelievable and still kind of hard to imagine and understand exactly how that technology works. Ann Arbor also using a chatbot similar to Dearborn. It's called Ask Ann. They use a vendor called, I believe, CityBot to power that chatbot. And chatbots aren't new, but what is new is that now with generative AI, the chatbots, you don't need to have specific questions and answers. It can really understand your question even if you're not using the most precise language, and can offer you information. The challenge with that, of course, is making sure that the chatbot doesn't give you an answer to a question just because it wants to answer your question. Ideally you have parameters that, if you ask the chatbot a question it doesn't know, it can tell you, I don't know, without just making up an answer and hallucinating an answer. And then, so one example on public safety is Warner Robins. They use a technology called ShotSpotter. That basically can detect gunfire in communities, and it does that through microphones that are installed by traffic lights or on street lamps. And then in the education space, New York, there's a college, John Jay. They have used predictive AI to look at which students are at risk of dropping out. And then they can do some work to work with those students before they drop out to make sure that they're getting the resources that they need to make the decision that's best for them and improve graduation rates. So those are just a handful of the examples that we've seen so far. And of course, governance is a really big consideration, and we talk about that in the report. Basically, there's a whole lot of governance mechanisms that cities are currently putting into use to make sure that AI is being used responsibly by staff. From transparency and accountability measures, of course, privacy and security, fairness and equity, and then also awareness and education, and having trainings for staff available. Either voluntarily or having focus groups or committed staff who can look at this issue more closely. Just as NLC has our advisory committee, I know the state of Wisconsin has a task force, and many cities as well have adopted task forces to look at this issue more closely to see what their city needs in terms of the governance mechanisms in place before you might adopt a really powerful AI tool. So that's the first half of our publication. The second half is an AI toolkit where we develop tools based on needs that we identified with the committee, who were themselves mayors and city officials from cities, towns, and villages across the country. So we found that there's a need for cities to understand first what or how their staff are currently using AI before they procure new tools or set policies. So that's what this first tool does of a landscape analysis, is different ways to survey and assess staff opinions and perceptions of AI and how they're using it in order to then make a better informed decision of what the city might do next, whether it's something that stays informal or individual use, or if it's tapped into an enterprise model. The second is a readiness assessment, similar to the first, but asks some questions on if the city has those governance mechanisms in place. And then the third tool is about developing the guidance and use policy. So we spoke with a number of cities that have use policies. The first ones were to come out were Boston and San Jose, and Tempe, Arizona, and Seattle. And there's been a handful more since then. We're keeping track of them. NLC is keeping track of those in a dashboard that we have online, and I can share that link with you all after this presentation is over. But really, there's many policies already in place that cities have, from privacy and equity, but the AI policy really just ensures that those policies are being updated because AI is always changing, and a vendor agreement that you lock into today, that vendor's capabilities might be different 1 year from now, or even a couple weeks from now. So part of the use policies is this idea that they constantly need to be updated and that there are tools you can use that NLC has or other organizations have to make sure that you're staying on top of AI governance. The one of our partners that's doing great work on this is the GovAI Coalition, that's based in San Jose. So I really, really recommend you look up the GovAI Coalition. If you haven't already, they have, I think 500 or 600 different individual agencies that are part of their coalition that are sharing best practices, sharing use cases, and they also have templates for policies that you can either copy paste with your own city information or amend as needed. And the last tool we have in the report is on public engagement, and it's a really quick Q&A of how you can talk to your staff, but also the public about how the city's using AI. So that's a really quick overview of what's in the report. Um, we are happy to answer any questions and, as I mentioned, share our resources that we have published. So in addition to the report, the dashboard, as well as some other one-off articles we've written. But yeah, thanks so much for your time. I think we have 4 or 5 minutes or so. If anyone has any questions, would be happy to answer those.
Okay. Thank you, Christopher and Angelina. I guess one question that comes to mind, and then we can open it up for other questions. But when cities or villages are using AI, have you ever heard of any instances where they've done an oops or they've kind of regretted a certain use of AI? Can you speak to that?
Yes, yeah, I can start. Angelina, you can add to any of that you would like to add as well. There've been many. I know if you look internationally, there's many more because those were cities that were among the very, very early adopters of AI in cities. So Rotterdam has a famous case where it was discriminating against certain families when it came to unemployment insurance. So that's kind of a famous case study. New York as well had a chatbot that they rolled out, I believe, a year and a half ago, and it was their workforce development team, and it was specifically geared toward helping small business owners start businesses. And the chatbot was actually instructing folks to break the law inadvertently, totally, accidental. But because of how, I mentioned that these chatbots want to answer your questions, even if they don't have an answer. So the chatbot was instructing folks to do some, shady at best practices in starting their business or acquiring business permits. Those are a couple examples that come to mind. Um, yeah, and I think the really contested examples are on public safety, of course, just because many of these vendors aren't very transparent about the way that their algorithms are making decisions or making predictions for things like who might be at risk for recidivism or things like that. So, yeah, I think especially for smaller cities who are looking at AI tools, it's good to look at the no-nos and sort of the cities that have had the luxury of trying and failing first, because there are a lot of risks, and it's in some instances just not worth breaking that public trust just for a little bit of gain and efficiency.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your virtual hand, whatever you're most comfortable with. Any questions or comments from our group?
Bob, this is Lisa Hanairo in Middleton. I wonder if Christopher could comment on, let's say a city has very strong climate change related goals. Now that we know that AI is drastically increasing the amount of energy we need to power these systems, is it inconsistent for a municipality to embrace AI while at the same time striving to achieve carbon neutrality?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And I think the real tension there lies in that some tools are being built to address sustainability challenges. There's a system in Tucson, Arizona, where it's specifically linked to their water pipe infrastructure, which is a critical need there. And they're using AI for that. Um, on the generative AI side, yes, yeah, all the latest reports are hinting at, or showing evidence that the water consumption from generative AI to cool down these data centers is pretty overwhelming. That will become more efficient over time, but there's no question of when that will become more efficient exactly. So I think that for right now, I think when it comes to building out an enterprise grade, model or software of something like ChatGPT or Anthropic, it might be a question of, does everyone really need this? Because, writing a 150-word email over ChatGPT can cost as much as 8 bottles of water. Just depending on where you live. The farther away you live from a data center, the more costly it becomes, from a sustainability lens. So yeah, I think it depends on who you ask, but I think yeah, it definitely is another consideration based on your city's goals of whether or not you want to build out something that's for all staff or just for certain staff. And I think the question zero for any AI application is asking if it's really a need that your team needs to solve a specific solution. So I think just building in those safeguards can help your city decide, is this really something that we need, especially given the sustainability goals of your city.
Okay. Mayor O'Connor, go ahead.
I don't have a specific question, but I just want to thank you for arranging for this presentation because I think I know enough about AI to be dangerous. And I think this has just been really interesting. And obviously, there's a lot of things we need to consider, and this is a whole new world. So I appreciate the access to the report and your presentation today. Thank you.
I think your comments are well taken, Mayor O'Connor. I think we all are intrigued by this and fascinated by it, but there's also kind of a danger unknown element about it as well. And I think, we all need to tread lightly and maybe let some other people make mistakes before we do, perhaps. So it's very interesting. Other comments?
This is Anne. I want the link to
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was just saying I put a link to the report in the chat, and it should have also been in your Monday newsletter, so you can download that report.
Okay,
I want
go ahead.
yeah, I want to make a comment about this. I don't think that this is, I think sometimes we need to take the risk. This is happening, and we also need to consider that since sometimes we have difficult on hiring new staff, how AI can help us to improve the productivity of our staff. And we need to look at what are the process and procedures that we can implement AI to improve productivity, especially in our cases. Sometimes we cannot hire, we have that staff capacity, and I think we need to be able to think about how to start using AI. I use it in my other job as an accountant. It's incredible how it's changing our industry, and I participate in a conference in December about this. And I was thinking how to implement some of those ideas that also in local government, but I think we need to all be open to this. Maybe we need to get more training, how to use ChatGPT and all the others, chats that are over there have, so I think we need to be open to this.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we were not open to it. I think it's just the element of the unknown. And for those of you that use it on a day-to-day basis, obviously there's more of a comfort level. So I think, the amount of productivity that can be increased in local municipalities, I think, is really unknown, but I think it's going to be an enormous tool moving forward, especially as it's harder and harder to, hire staff and retain staff. So. Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, well, Christopher and Angelina, and let's see, there was one, Catherine, you joined us as well. Thank you all for being here today.
You're very welcome. And I know I mentioned a few different organizations and tools, so I can share those with Anne or you can reach out to myself, Angelina, or Catherine, and we'll make sure you have those if you're interested in any of those.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.